Welcome to UFT Alumni Mentorship Program's Industry Chronicles with Jason Lee.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today for our AMP panel, where we have somebody from the industry today joining us. Today, we have Jason Lee, who is a consultant at the Boston Consulting Group and who graduated from U of T Engineering actually a few years ago. So I'm going to give the floor to Jason so that he can introduce himself now.
Hey everyone, really great to meet everyone. Jason Lee. So I'm right now a consultant at BCG, specialization in digital transformations and digital strategy. Did did across industries, including like industrial goods, manufacturing, and insurance. So previously graduated from MIT dual MBA and MS in mechanical engineering program. And then before that, I graduated from engineering science program, 1G3 plus PUI and worked as a nuclear engineer before going to MBA. So hopefully I'll be able to add value in terms of like how to recruit, how to plan your career, and hopefully you'll be able to learn something.
Super exciting. Thanks for joining us today, Jason.
Our first question for you today, we're kind of trying to get some insight into what a typical day in your role right now looks like.
Yeah, so I think like great thing about consulting is like it is very dynamic and like week to week, day to day, like it really changes a lot. So right now, like a typical day would be like like you have so it's very team based and we collaborate a lot with our managers, with our colleagues, with our clients a lot. So like we have morning check-ins to figure out priorities for that day, and then so all of us have a module that we own. So whether it be like doing supply chain optimization or like doing like growth strategy. So we give like a little bit of updates on what the module is, and then we have and then just speak like what are the blockers, what are some of the key meetings that like we need to watch out for, and then rest of the day is sprinkled in with like more client meetings, more internal meetings, or like doing heads down time for analysis, and then we have checkout around 5 to 6, and that would be like priorities you have on your plate for that night, and then we like push. And typically my day ends around like 10 or 11, which is not the greatest, but I mean, yeah, but like we do get a lot of iteration and like create a lot of value. So.
It sounds like you have a very like structured, organized day, but you also mentioned you usually go till 10. So do you find like going over is a result of like extra work that you have to do, or is that kind of part of like the normal structure?
It is very normal. I think it's like very normal working hours, and it's because so like a lot of the timelines for at least I've been on, it's very condensed where we're trying to do a lot in a short amount of time. So typically what we say is like we have multiple iteration cycles, as in like you have it's not like you send it out for the day and then you review it. You have multiple checkpoints, and definitely that's why where you have like where you work on something from the night up from the day and you get comments back or like things to incorporate, and then you update them on the night, so you're able to like work twice as fast.
That's super interesting also to kind of like hear about especially the difference and how dynamic your days can be. And I think moving into that with that in mind, I think one other thing we were wondering about are kind of what are the need to knows about consulting, especially for someone who doesn't really know what consulting is, or even for people who kind of know a little bit about it. What are the need to knows?
So yeah, like I didn't know anything about consulting. I like only found out through like doing MBA, and I was like very like engineering mindset. And so one thing that I think like kind of surprised me on consulting is like the bar to entry is actually like a lot lower than you think. It's like I think for engineers, like we're well equipped to do consulting job. Like we have a very analytical mind. We're able to problem solve. Like we're able to break down big problems into smaller chunks and be able to tackle them, which is like very positive for consulting. And I think one thing I really appreciate about consulting is that it does teach me a lot of traits and a lot of skill set that complements my engineering skills. So whether it be like communications or like client engagement or like just like how to navigate political systems. And definitely like it is a good balance of like technical and like soft skills that you'll be able to develop.
Can you talk a little bit about some of the projects you've worked on, especially coming from your engineering background? Have there been any more like interesting or challenging projects that you've done?
So I think that's a very good question. I think out of all the projects I've done, like a growth strategy for an insurance provider was like the most challenging thing, is because so like being an engineer, like we're like really detail oriented. We're like we have to get the numbers right. But like so that philosophy doesn't work when you're like dealing with like multi-billion-dollar company and trying to figure out different streams to grow in, right? And so we have this rule, 80-20 rule, which is where like let's get to the 80% of the answer really quickly and then decide if it's sufficient, and then like try to focus on like very narrow paths where we have to get that 20% effort to get the accurate result. And that's definitely like something that was hard for me to adjust to because I didn't feel comfortable doing that. But definitely by the end, I mean, just with the short timeline of the scope and just like what we were like asked to do, I mean, that was like the only way that we could deliver.
You mentioned the 80-20 rule, right? And
Yeah.
being able to work under that framework is a little bit difficult. And so I'm curious, like, have there been other examples of times where you've kind of faced a challenge that's like provided you with an opportunity to grow? Or did that kind of flatline after you first entered the role and you kind of ramped up to what it was like to be a consultant?
I think great thing about consulting is like for each case, there's a new thing that you're developing. So and you work with your like, so we call them staffing managers, or which are like people who find projects for you, and you work together to find like, okay, what are the career aspirations you have? What are the skills that you need to develop? So for example, for my current case, which is so we're revamping like digital pharmacy e-commerce platform for our client. And definitely like one of the reasons why I took it was because it had a lot of like client engagement factor where like as a consultant, I need to own a lot of the client engagement and relationships and work directly with them, which is not an experience that I had in the past. So you do talk about like things that you want to develop to get to like higher tenure, to prepare yourself for more responsibilities and like whatever your career aspiration might be in the future.
Jason, if I may, I want to take a little bit of transition to start talking about, I guess, your career path leading up to entering the consulting industry. And specifically, I want to ask you about your postgraduate education and if you feel that it was necessary to go back and do an MBA in order to break into the consulting space.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And like, so like kind of just like showing what my career trajectory was. Like I graduated engineering science, like did the energy systems option, go energy by the way. But and I worked as a nuclear engineer for 5 years, got my professional engineering designation. And I think that was the time when I was thinking is like, okay, is this what I want to do? I'm always really passionate about clean energy, but I feel like I just don't have the other opportunities in mind. And that's something that I wanted to try out. So I think for me, like I chose to go to MBA, not to get into consulting, but just to try to pivot and see what is out there. And I think for me, like it's been like a really good like eye opener. I didn't even know about consulting before. Didn't know about like 90% of the industries out there is new about engineering. So definitely like really good. And I met like really like awesome people at my business school. I feel like it's like gonna be a long lasting friendship. But but MBA is not a requirement to get into consulting. I actually see a lot of people who get into consulting without engineering, like whether it be like straight from undergrad, like they recruit heavily from U of T, and then like we have experienced hires, which is people who have 2 or 3 or even 5 or 6 years in tenure, and then they jump at a different scale or different experience. So definitely that's not it. There are like you just have to like get used to consulting interview process, which involves like a case prep, doing case interview. But as long as you're okay with that, and as long as you can kind of demonstrate your like analytical skill as well as your problem solving skills, I think it is open to everyone.
Okay, that's great to hear, and I'm sure that a lot of our listeners are actually glad to hear that as well, because I think a lot of people in our program are particularly targeting the consulting industry and would like to try and get there straight out of their undergraduate.
Yeah, and also like I do see like a lot of engineers like that.
Yeah.
Like engineering consulting is like very like standard path and something that like is like it complements our skill set really nicely.
You had mentioned like the analytical mindset and like coming in the problem solving. Yeah, I mean that's excellent to hear.
I find that really interesting, especially since I also am like, oh, do I want to get like an MBA after graduating, like, or after working? And I think adding on to Ben's question, I kind of want to pose a similar one, talking a little bit about what the transition was like, especially going from like an engineering degree to working to then going back to school for something different from engineering, which was business. But what was the transition like for you?
That's a good question. And I think like the biggest thing that like pops into my mind is commitment, I guess. So when you're working, like you're so stuck into like working mindset, and you're like you have these like life decisions where you're like, for me it was like, okay, do I want to buy a house or get graduate education? And like going to MBA, that is a big opportunity cost as well, because it's 2 years that you're not working, and tuition is not low as well, and definitely like is, and then so you need to factor that in. And I think like I was able to make that commitment, and like some of my fellow peers like decided not to make that commitment, and which is totally fine either way. In terms of transition, for me, MBA was definitely a lot easier than engineering, because I think engineering undergrad, like especially like U of T, is like pretty hard, and so like definitely like MBA, like you won't be doing all-nighters. Like but it does challenge you in like different ways. It's like there's a lot of more like networking, there's a lot of like company events, and there's a lot of like proactiveness that is needed. Like if you want to do something like while you're going, like a lot of people do something on the side while they go to school, like whether if you're working with a startup or like doing the startup their own, or like being involved with different clubs like autonomous vehicle club, and like so definitely like in that aspect you have to be a lot more proactive than engineering. But in terms of transition, it was pretty seamless.
Thanks for that answer, Jason. In terms of like moving from engineering to business, right? You decided to go to an MBA, and you mentioned that there's like a big opportunity cost, right? So now that you've kind of gone through that process, and as a result, you like became a consultant, would you say that's something that you want to do long term? And then maybe just to add to that question, like, do you think that situation would be different if you were somebody who was coming out straight from your undergrad and was going into consulting? Because I feel like now you're leveraging the experience you've had in the industry, whereas somebody who's going from engineering is making that switch initially and didn't build up any experience from before.
Yeah, that's a good question. And like I think so for me, I'm not sure if consulting is gonna be like my like long-term career path. Like a lot of consultants, how they take it is like it be included is like we look at it 6 months at a time. And the reason is because consulting gives you wide range of opportunities where you can kind of pick, you kind of start realizing like what you really like and what you don't. And also another thing is like it does give you a lot of great exit opportunities, where a lot of the recruiters, a lot of companies definitely like value your skill set within their organization as well. So we definitely like evaluate 6 months at a time, and like it is hard to say like if this is my like dream career. There's definitely pros and cons to this. So it is definitely like okay to say that. In terms of people who are like, I guess like for a lot of consultants that I see like coming straight from undergrad, I definitely think it's like good to try something else. And then whether it be so, because like if you've only been in the consulting role, like it's hard to figure out like what other opportunities are there, or like what kind of issues are there in industry. And definitely like what a lot of like a lot of undergrad hires do is like they take 2 years to MBA, or where they're able to do an internship at a different company and then come back, or they do like we call them boomerangs, which is they like leave for a year or 2 years to a different company and then always come back. So like BCG is really great because we value like experience a lot with BCG. So it's like even if you leave, as long as you leave like with good terms, and definitely like it won't be too difficult for you to come back to the role that you had before. So which is always a great safety net.
So there's always kind of space to come back, like it's almost like a safety net in a way. You did mention that there's some like there's exit opportunities, right? So would you say that if you're thinking about leaving the firm, then like consulting is a way to kind of like level up to a managerial role? Is that what the exit opportunity would be?
Yeah. So like it could be like, so like a lot of people think consulting as like a stepping stone, as in so it does like I think of it as like MBA 2.0. Like you're still like building that skill set. You're like, okay, like what do I lack? Like what do I have to work on? And definitely and it is good because a lot of these skill sets are like very valuable for other companies. Definitely like in terms of like managerial role or like even like how you break down like strategy, like how you break down complex problems. So definitely like there are a lot of like enticing like extra opportunities out there.
Gotcha. And then I just wanted to touch on one other thing you mentioned during your answer. You said there's a lot of boomerangs, right? And so there's people who are like at BCG and they'll come back. I'm curious if that is something that's like common in the consulting industry. And maybe if your answer could be kind of commenting on like in terms of how BCG stacks up against other firms in terms of people like even being willing to return because of the culture that you guys have there.
Well, on the second part of the question, I like it's hard to like compare like different firms because like I've only been in BCG. I think this like thing is like very common across like at least McKinsey and Bain and BCG as well. And it's and for the first one, it's not common, but it's not uncommon. It's like not everyone's gonna do it because a lot of people when they exit like consulting, it's either A, like they found what they wanted to do, or B, they want better work-life balance. And as long as like one of those needs are met, I mean, I don't think they'll ever come back to consulting. I think if they like for them to come back to consulting, it'd be like, oh, okay, like I tried something else. I realized consulting is what I want to do for the rest of my life. Like I'm gonna make the senior partner.
Thanks for answering those questions. I want to transition over to kind of in a similar vein, talking about consulting, but more so, especially for people who kind of like want to get into it on like the undergrad level, whether it's like through internships or like getting an entry level role, talking a little more about what the application process is like for these consulting firms. I think you probably know better for like BCG than like other firms, but in general, what is the application process normally look like in these timelines? Because I know for a lot of consulting firms, it's usually like an earlier timeline than for a lot of other companies.
Yeah, I remember like so when I did it, it was like an MBA hire consult like recruitment, so it might be different, but it is typically a lot quicker than most of the other companies. And so typically like there's like two timelines that you need to think of. It's like first is like the summer internship timeline, where I think they typically like target third or fourth year like students, and then to get them experience on BCG. And then typically like a lot of these internships do convert into full-time offers. And then there's the other aspect where it's like when you're fourth year, when you're senior, you do have like the full-time recruiting process. I'm not sure about like specific timelines, but for me, I think the biggest thing, like how I thought about recruitment process, is that consulting is so unique in terms of like what the recruitment process is, what the interview process is that like I needed to dig in and like kind of commit time to it. Whether it be first is like with like networking with people in the firm, like trying to figure out which is the right firm, like which area they want to work in, like which projects sound really cool to you. And then second of all, like the case prep, as in like there is like a very unique aspect of consulting where you just have to like think in a certain way. It was like going through that mini school for me, where you're like you have school and then like you practice for a couple hours with people to do it. But it was a fun experience, but like something that definitely like needs a little bit of commitment and a little bit of drive and proactiveness from you if you want to pursue consulting.
Yeah, I've seen like the sample case studies online. They're like very intense, definitely require a lot of prep for them.
Yeah, like so I was a very slow learner, so it took me like a lot of cases, a lot of iterations. So I wouldn't like, and then by the end they became like less daunting. So like I like urge everyone to like definitely try it out if it's a path that you want, but it does take like commitment and time where you need to be sure that, hey, this is what I want.
Jason, maybe on a lighter note, I know that due to the nature of consulting work, there's a lot of travel typically built into your job. And I just want to ask you, how much are you personally traveling in your role? And also, what is your favorite place that you have traveled to through your work?
Okay, that's a good question. I think so. This was like the thing that I was very scared about when I was going into consulting, is because like travel, like they travel so much, and like they travel in and out. And one great thing is like COVID has really changed that.
Oh, yeah.
I definitely think it's for the better. So this is we're still trying to figure out the right like operating model to figure out like what is the great like right level of travel. But the projects that I've been on, which we've gone to a hybrid model. So it used to be that consultants travel to the client site. So they take a 6 a.m. like Monday flight out to the client site, and they're there till like Thursday afternoon. So from Monday to Thursday, you expect to be traveling and be away from home. It's transitioned to a hybrid model where we only go to client side if needed, and there's definitely like meetings that's a lot better in face-to-face in-person aspect of it. But instead what we do is we actually co-locate. So we travel to a BCG office because we have team members from all across North America, and then we work collaboratively in person. And so for my case, the cadence has been 1 week remotely, or 1 week whichever city that we pick it is. So last week was Dallas. The 2 weeks before it was New York. So it's wherever people are and like city that we want to check out. And it is a lot fun experience. Like it's a lot more fun experience than working at the client site because you are surrounded by your peers. Like you don't have to worry about like taking like calls with confidential information. And it is like there's lots of visibility and scrutiny into things that you do, which is so it's been really great. And just because of people have been really respectful of COVID. So like and like personal reasons, sometimes I mean if you have doctor's appointment at like Wednesday, it's hard for you to travel. They're definitely okay with that. I mean, there's definitely travel where it makes sense and where it doesn't. So I think we've like struck up a good balance about it.
And just to follow up on, the role that COVID has played in shifting the workplace dynamic, how do you foresee the change in the hybrid workplace model? Because I do know that now, as things are opening up more and more across North America, a lot of more businesses are pushing for the in-person workplace model to kind of return. So how do you see that? How do you see that transition occurring in the consulting industry?
Yeah, that's something that we talk about all the time. So this is like Jason's view, not like BCG's view. So take this with a grain of salt. But I think it'll be case dependent and client
Yeah,
dependent,
that
and
makes
and
sense.
even topic dependent. I mean, there was a project that I was looking at, which is where you need to make operational changes to a manufacturing plant, and that's really hard to do remotely. That's a job where you require like kind of Monday to Thursday being on the site, like talking to the shift manager, trying to figure out what's going on, trying to figure out what the bottleneck is. But we have since realized that for other cases where we're maybe working on growth strategy, we don't have to be at client site week after week. And I think it's going to be a balance where hopefully I think we only travel to client site, or we only travel when there's a value, when we have added value to it. Other than that, like doing it remotely or hybrid would be sufficient. And like by value, I think like one of the best like value about working in person is like camaraderie. Like it's so hard to like build relationships on Zoom and on Slack, and like but like 1 week of co-location or like being in the same city, like you go out for like dinner and you like talk about your personal life, a little bit of like you joke around. Definitely like it goes a long way into like ensuring you have a good working relationship with your team.
Yeah, there's definitely pros and cons to both sides, and I think that everybody has really learned that through doing over the last couple of years, and kind of what the drawbacks are to the hybrid work model and vice versa, right? But yeah, I mean, it sounds like consulting is kind of trending in the same direction as the majority of other businesses, and I mean that makes sense.
Maybe one good question to kind of get in before we close the interview is, what's one piece of advice you'd give to an undergraduate student? Most of our listeners are going to be like undergrads, and so what would you say to our viewers today?
About consulting or about career or about life or
In general, any
Take your
piece of
pick.
advice.
I think I'll go with the last one, which is about life. Is like I think like so like when I was like fourth year, there was like it was kind of stressful trying to get jobs or like trying to get internships or trying to get like the best one, and you compare yourself to peers, and that was definitely stressful. I think everyone has different paths, and I think it's like I think you only make sense of it like looking back. And I think if it's an industry that you want or company that you want, I think like you will eventually get there. And it's just like don't stress too much about it. Like I think for every experience, you should try to get the most value out of it and try to like try to appreciate that experience as much as possible. And at the end, I think hopefully it'll all work out.
That is such good advice.
That's awesome.
That's so
Yeah.
sweet.
I really like that, especially like it all only really makes sense sometimes when you look back at it. Like I think that's very true, you know. So it's good to keep that in your head when you're living in that moment. It's kind of tough to keep going.
Yeah, I wasn't like the smartest student in like engineering, and like definitely like there's all these peers, like all this peer pressure, and like it definitely in like U of T engineering. I don't know if it's like culture there, but like everyone's so smart, so you compare yourself to other. But like definitely like you like being at U of T engineering, I think you've proven that you are very technically savvy, like you're analytical. I think everything else is like a very clean slate. So like whatever journey you do, whatever career path you do, it's all going to be like very fine.
Awesome advice. And I just want to say thank you so much, Jason, for coming today and sharing so much insightful conversation with us. I think a lot of this was all of it was valuable. And I'm excited for everyone else to hear it other than like the three of us. I'm excited for everyone to hear what you've said today because I think it sparked kind of some exciting new ideas, even in me, of things I want to think about. So thank you so much for your time and for like all of what you shared today. I really appreciate it.
Perfect. Yeah, awesome. Thank you for guiding the interviews. Great questions.